Summer routines live or die by how easy they are, and honestly, if something takes too much effort, I'm out. That's why Groons is my go-to. It's my one daily pack of gummies covering my greens, vitamins, and minerals. Plus, it has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is more than 2 cups of broccoli. No mixing powders, no giant pills, no hassle. I just rip open the pack and I'm done. They taste good and they make it easy to stay on top of my health, even when life gets busy. Save up to 52% with the code PODCAST at Groons.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
It's the Go Gopher podcast with Mike Grimm, episode number 67. I am Mike Grimm, voice of the Golden Gophers, and welcome back to the podcast. We're talking Golden Gopher football in this week's podcast as we're getting closer and closer to the NFL draft, and there should be some Golden Gopher players who hear their names called this coming week and weekend. Marcus Hendrickson is the Director of Player Personnel for Golden Gopher football. That means he's the liaison between the Gopher program and the NFL teams. If you want to know about what NFL teams think about the Gophers, Marcus is the guy to ask. If you want to know what Gopher football does in order to prepare players for the NFL, Marcus is the guy to talk to. In today's episode, we'll explore what the NFL personnel departments think about the Gopher prospects and how the Gopher players get ready for the draft, among a host of other relevant topics with the talented and knowledgeable Marcus Hendrickson. Our Go Gopher podcast is presented by alumni-owned Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. If you're a business founder planning to exit your business, start by contacting Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. Sunbelt serves more businesses up to $5 million in revenue than anyone, and True North M&A serves companies with revenues up to $150 million. Get a confidential, no-cost, no-obligation business valuation started today. Make the most of your life's work. Visit sunbeltminnesota.com or tnma.com today. We're thrilled they're associated with the Go Gopher podcast. It was my pleasure to be part of their all-company luncheon a couple of weeks ago as they talked about servant leadership and the impact True North has on the community. We're also glad to have Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union with us here on the Go Gopher podcast each week. Affinity Plus is your local credit union throughout the state of Minnesota. Find out more at affinityplus.org/Go Gophers. Our podcast is sponsored by State Farm agent Tony Hoagland at ChamplinInsurance.com, and we're podcasting episode 67 from the Aquarius Home Services studio. One other quick note, if you're a restaurant or business owner who'd like to have the podcast at your venue and are interested in partnering with us, please contact the great folks at Talk North. We'd love to be on location on a regular basis. TalkNorth.com is where to go. Find Karen Cleary for details. We also invite you to subscribe to the Go Gopher podcast. You can go back and listen to the Go Gopher podcast from weeks gone by, including last week's show, which featured new Golden Gopher co-defensive coordinator Nick Monroe, the man they call the Swag Daddy. Find out why in that episode. Go back and listen. You'll certainly enjoy the behind-the-scenes insight into Golden Gopher football. It's free to subscribe and free to listen at any time. This week, it's episode 67 of the Go Gopher podcast. We're talking Golden Gopher football again. Our guest this week is Director of Player Personnel Marcus Hendrickson. My conversation with him is next.
I'm Clay Geary, walk-on turned scholarship wide receiver for Gopher football.
And I'm Ben Utek, U of M alumni, Super Bowl champion, and Tony Dungy Uncommon Award winner.
We understand championship culture, which is why we're part of the True North family of companies.
True North invests in only elite teams, like the champion team at Sunbelt Business Advisors, Minnesota's largest seller of companies. To learn more about True North and our diverse family of independently owned companies, visit TrueNorthEquityPartners.com.
Hi, Gopher fans. Switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on lights, we switch TV channels, we switch on the TV. And with the new transfer portal, some college students even switch colleges, which can seem crazy to us diehard fans. But what's not crazy is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, my agency can switch you over so we can start saving today. My team is ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood and show you it is, in fact, easy to switch and save. When you want the real deal, check us out at ChamplinInsurance.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
It's episode 67, the Go Gopher podcast, and we're talking Gopher football with Golden Gopher Director of Player Personnel, Marcus Hendrickson. He's a return visitor. It was about a year ago this time we had Marcus on the show and talking about Gophers who may or may not be drafted, who may or may not get a shot in the National Football League. As the Director of Player Personnel, he has a great feel for that, and I want to say it was either right before or right after you had your baby, right?
It was right after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a year old?
Yeah, April 6th last year. So he's a little over a year now.
Yeah. How's he doing? How's fatherhood been for 12 months in now?
It's a joy. Work-life balance has been a new challenge for me with the little guy, but he's 25 pounds at his 1-year checkup. He's a tank. Callie's already offered to coach him up a little bit of O-line stuff in the future, so we're going to put that ball in his hand and make him a center, I think.
A center. Yeah. That's always a good spot. This program particularly has had a nice run of centers. You, of course, were a linebacker at Luther College. We have to get the gratuitous
Absolutely.
Luther College plug in early.
Absolutely.
A couple of Norsemen here on the podcast. I'm a little before your time. I'm 93 and you're 08.
Yep.
I, though, was a teammate of your brother, your older brother, Milt. I was a senior when he was a freshman, and he was on the baseball and football team, a dual sport star at Luther, and he has played football. I'm trying to think, was he a defensive end?
He played both ways when he started.
So total athlete.
Yeah. So he was O-line, D-line, and then I think he was just O-line down the stretch.
Yeah.
And then first base.
First base, yeah, I remember that. He started as a freshman. I was a senior, and he came right in as a freshman, and then he got into coaching, and now he's with the Green Bay Packers. And
That is correct.
I suppose his track into pro football as a scout, now in the front office, helped you in terms of inspiration and want to?
Yeah, I think he definitely made it a possibility. My whole youth was watching him play football, watching my brother Marty play football, watching my brother Mitch play football. So I was always drug around to all their
You're the youngest
events.
of four, then?
Youngest of four boys. Yeah. 3 of us played football at Luther. And so my whole life was following what they were doing athletically. So I spent a lot of time watching football players, watching athletes. I didn't realize I probably had the talent to evaluate them so early, but it was just kind of a natural transition for me. And then Milt's success in the business obviously opened some doors for me to kind of find my own path in the industry as well. So,
what's his official title now? Is he like number 2 in command at the front?
Yeah,
office?
so his title is Director of Football Operations, but he doesn't plan the trips, like the way Dan F does for us in terms of hotels and flights and stuff like that. But so when you get that high up, everyone's got a title. I think even I'm a director. I don't know how many people work under me, so I don't consider myself a director. I just consider myself a football guy. So
yeah,
but he's real busy. He's in the throes of it right now, getting everything lined up for Thursday. So.
Yeah, has he? Is he in the? And you can answer however you want here. I'm somewhat joking. Is he in the heat of negotiating with the New York Jets to get rid of Aaron Rodgers?
I think the brothers have a little chat where we kind of are able to probably talk a little bit here and there, but even he's intentionally vague these days with a lot of the information. So I know that they're doing their best like we are this time of year, trying to put the best team out there for the fall. I trust them. I trust Goody to do the best for the Green Bay Packers organization for the long term, and we'll see what happens.
The Hendrickson family grew up in Wisconsin, so you guys are Packers anyway, right?
Yeah, that's our dad's fault. This is all Don Hendrickson's fault for making us as passionate about football as we are. So,
what was the trek? And I'm going to bore people here for the next 60 seconds. What was the trek to Luther? What was? How did you guys get 3 brothers through Luther College? Of course, I call it God's country. It's the greatest little town in America.
We grew up in the Driftless area as well, where my hometown is. So that's where Decorah is at, southeast Minnesota, that whole area. So obviously it's beautiful there. Milt went there. Coach Naslin was a head football coach at the time. They recruited him hard. Football, baseball was a big thing for him. Mm-hmm. He was an all-state football, baseball player, and so being able to play both was a big deal for him. I know he had some walk-on opportunities at some larger schools, but that wasn't exactly what he wanted to do. So he chose that, and then brother Marty followed in suit, and then there was a gap there because my brother Mitch decided to go to Marquette and forge his own path, and but then Milt was coaching and was recruiting me to play there, so he signed me to go to Luther College, and then after a year he left for the Baltimore Ravens, and I think I was the only family member a little bit sad by it.
Yeah.
But he's done tremendous things that way for all of us. So.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's great. Well, you're so busy, and I find myself I can't get back to watch any Luther games either because we got our Saturdays pretty well full, and in season it's hard. I did make it back the night we had the Indiana game on a Friday years ago, 2018 maybe. It was homecoming the next day, so I was able to hop in the car Saturday morning and see some old buddies, and that was fun.
Yeah, I've been able to get down probably more when I was an area scout because I kind of covered the area, so I could swing in a trip there to go see some old buddies. But when we're busy season and their busy season, it's hard to get down there.
For sure. Well, let's talk about the spring game. We're going to talk certainly the main reason we had you on, one, because you have just great football knowledge and great connections, and we can tap into some of your insight in terms of guys that have are moving on, hopefully, to play pro football. So we'll get to that in a minute. But I do want to ask you about the spring game, which was just completed this past Saturday. As we record right now, it's the Monday following the spring game, and you may look at it in a different perspective than maybe an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator or a head coach or what have you. So I always like to see, because as director of player personnel, you might have a different goal than maybe an offensive or defensive coordinator or a position coach. So what was your perspective? What did you see on Saturday?
It was fun to see the guys compete, and we were 15th practice, so it's the last practice of the year, and everyone's kind of in different stages. You've got the guys who've played a lot of football and the guys who haven't played a lot of football. And so there's a couple key positions that I felt was really good to see some of the younger guys play in that setting, in that environment, that haven't been asked to do that yet. So for me, it's always just stay healthy and see the competitive level. And I thought the guys did an outstanding job of challenging each other, competing with each other, and then having fun with it. And then I think we got a lot of very good reps with some guys that we needed to get reps and kind of give us some confidence going into the fall then that, where our depth is at some spots and who's going to really compete this fall to be the guy. So I thought from my standpoint, it was a really good event. As always, Coach and G put on, those flags are kind of funny. And strategically, I was thinking a lot of should we throw these flags now? Should we throw these flags later? But just in terms of a different way of looking at the game of football than has ever been played. So it was fun.
It was fun. It was fun. And they always make it an event. Last year it came down to field goals at the end in a shootout style, and this year 2-point conversions, which actually there's some practicality to that because there could be at some point a game that is how the outcome's determined. If you go, into a fourth overtime or third overtime, I can't remember now exactly, but whatever it is, that is how a game is decided. So there's actually some practicality to both in terms of putting a field goal kicker under pressure and then putting an offense and defense under pressure.
Yeah, it's good, and I think we're running out of time for TV wise too. So I think the fact that we didn't go to quadruple overtime was good for the viewers too. So.
Yeah, he fit it into the window, no doubt about that. As you look, there's always guys in spring football that will flash. Like over the years, even here, there's been this guy had 100 yards rushing, and there's times where then you never hear from that guy again. He stays. It doesn't mean he's not good. He just he's on the team and he has a role and he's contributed in one way, but not like what you saw there. And then there's other guys. Rashad Bateman comes to mind. I'm trying to think some other guys over the years, even last year, Athan to a certain degree, that you're like, oh, this kid, the first time we've really seen him in action. And then, yes, of course, they show up, as the fall approaches. Mm-hmm. So what did you think from that standpoint? Because there were certainly some guys, newcomers, some guys that have been maybe even some of the transfers that have been other places producing that were productive Saturday too.
No, I think there's some young players, especially at the running back position. There was Jordan Newman, Tyler's little brother, did a really good job with his opportunities. Darius Taylor, Zach Evans. I think all the three of those guys showed. Sean, we kind of know because he's got a background, his time at Western Michigan, but just the number of guys at that position that really stepped up and had good days. And then I think just in terms of the receiving core is really, there's a lot of familiar faces and there's a lot of new faces there as well. And I think I thought across the board, these guys caught the ball really well and were very competitive, and it showed the depth of that position that we've kind of infused over the last few months. So.
And then from I asked you before we came on the air, does it relax a little for you now that the spring game's over, and you kind of giggled and said not at all? And I suppose the whole coaching staff then is that way too, right? There's still work to be done here.
Yeah, and you're always looking at short term, long term. When you're building a roster, you've got the immediacy of this coming fall, but then you also have 2024, 2025, 2026. You're always thinking about short-term, long-term about how you build your roster. And I think our coaches are going out on the road, and they're going to go out and look at some high school kids, guys that we've got a lot of kids committed, a lot of guys that are kind of next up in that realm, and just getting the live eyes on some guys, especially outside of our footprint, kind of to where maybe we haven't had a chance to see them in person yet. So getting those guys seen, but those guys aren't going to be here this fall. So obviously transfer portal is something that's very big these days. And so, the portal being open right now, the spring, this window being open right now, even in my seat, if we may not be looking at a position, but you're always constantly seeing what's out there and who's coming and going and the teams that you're playing against. But then also, is there an opportunity for you to make your team better too? So that's always in these windows when guys have the opportunity to go in, it's very busy in my desk.
Yeah, I bet. And your desk, so let's talk about Director of Player Personnel. If you can, I'm sure you're asked this all the time. Well, what do you do, right? What's your role? What is your job?
Yeah, so nuts and bolts, it's the evaluation side of recruiting. So there's a big part of high school recruiting. We talk about a funnel. There's, hundreds of thousands of kids that play across the country, and then we've got a staff that helps, and there's services that we subscribe to as well that help us whittle that name to several thousand kids every year that we probably look at. And then in my chair, I help funnel those names to Coach Fleck, our coordinators, our position coaches, help them in terms of building their boards, in terms of who do we really want to be recruiting, who's talented enough to be recruiting. So I use that kind of evaluation side of the background that way. And then obviously with transfer portal becoming what it has been since our tenure here, it's really another avenue to add to your roster. And so the two windows from this December, January, and then now in April, there's hundreds of kids that are entering the portal some are lower level kids wanting to come up, some are high level kids that maybe are looking for different opportunity. And so, depending on that Goldilocks, vein of the type of kid that we want, character-wise, to come into our program, the type of talent and ability that they need to have to be successful here. So it's you're looking for a needle in a haystack a little bit, but I think over our tenure, the transfer portal has helped us more than it's hurt us in terms of us identifying really good players, really good people that fit what we do, and come in. Hopefully keep adding to our roster and adding to our success here in Minnesota.
Yeah, I've said that too when people have asked, oh, this guy's leaving and this and whatever. I'm like, yeah, at the end of the day, the Gopher football program has benefited more. They've gotten more production than they've lost in the transfer portal. Certainly, I'm sure there's a kid or two that if we would have had him, think about this or that. But on the flip side, you've been able to bring some guys in that you wouldn't have. I even think back to year one. It had to been a transfer portal. And again, no knock on the two guys because we love them. The guys, Connor, who was around, but you probably go get a quarterback in year one, right? If the portal's around and can be a different factor. So things have even changed in the 6.5 years that this staff's been here.
Yeah, it's amazing the number that you're able to sign now.
Right.
We used to have a cap on the number of kids we could bring in, and if we could have brought in unlimited players that first year in transfer portal, we may not have had a team when we got here. There may have only been 20 kids still sticking around. So it works both ways in that sense too. But I'm glad we're at where we're at now with everything. But it's really I think Chris Williamson, who's draft pick, He was a transfer that we got in here. Ben St. Juste is a draft pick. Who's a transfer we got in here. Jack Gibbons, linebacker, is a transfer we got in here. Started games for Tennessee last year. So that's just off the top of my head. 3 guys that that didn't play a lot or were playing at a lower level. That I give our coaches and Dan Nickel a ton of credit just in terms of development of guys, both in the game of football and then also physically and mentally, getting those guys to be. Helping them on the road. They've done the work, but then helping them get to where they're at now. And I think when we end up talking about our 2023 NFL draft class, there's a ton of those guys that kind of fit that bill too of maybe they weren't wanted by a lot of people, but we wanted them. And they put in, the work and the character of these young men, and then just their ability to develop in our systems and put themselves in a really good position come this Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So.
Thinking about your role too, you might be the only guy in the program that might be the very first guy to see a high school kid on film, right? One of the very first guys, and now evaluate him and say, yes, this is a kid we should pursue and the fit's there or whatever. Till right to the very end, you might be the last guy to send them out the door, getting them in contact with an NFL team and an NFL scout and an agent and a workout and all that stuff, where there are recruiting people on staff. But most of their job is to get high school kids here, and they probably don't. I mean, they do pay attention to the whole thing, but they're probably not as concerned on the back end. And there are coaches that develop in the middle. You're maybe the only guy that is start to finish. From a kid might be in 10th grade, and him when he's or are aware of him when he's 16 to now he's 22 and might get drafted.
Yeah, it's. It is unique because I think there's definitely a lull in there. When we get them, then the coaches have them. And then their last year here, I spend every day talking to NFL scouts about all these guys. And so it's funny thinking about being at Western Michigan in 2016 with, Tanner and John Michael, and then seeing them now at the spring game on Saturday. And, this is the last time I'll see you before it, so good luck. And if you need anything, call, and if I hear anything, I'll let you know type stuff too, because it is a unique relationship right now, because I know a lot of the guys in the NFL I used to work with or I'm acquaintance with, or they come through the building now, and they're the ones that are asking me about these guys throughout the year, and then I'll kind of be in the loop a little bit if, hey, we're going to take this guy before, and then I try to put the bat signal out to all of our staff to say, hey, this is coming down the pipe. So, but these. It's a wild, path to think some of these guys, the ones that have made it to this point, just the amount of work that they put in, and it's to me, this is the best class we've ever signed. These kids, just because, you think about Muhammad Ibrahim didn't have a Power 5 offer except for Minnesota. Tanner Morgan didn't have a Power 5 offer except for Minnesota. John Michael didn't have a Power 5 offer except for Minnesota. Mariano, Thomas Rush, Jordan Howden. That's 6 guys that will be on an NFL, roster in a week from now that didn't have Power 5 offers except for Minnesota. So I think that just speaks to the coaches that we've had here, and then also the strength staff that we had here to train these guys mentally and physically to get to this point. So,
You mentioned something last year on this podcast that I thought was pretty deep and something I hadn't thought about, and I've talked about it with people since, that NFL scouts know with how PJ Fleck runs the program, there is maybe a certain requirement amongst players within the culture, as PJ describes it, that you have to have a special knack. You have to have extra oomph. You have to have more drive. There's extra required if you're going to go through this thing. And as PJ has said, it's not for everybody. And you mentioned that the NFL scouts have talked to you that they know if a guy's gone through 4 or 5, or in some cases now 6 years in this program, that they're going to be able to handle stuff in the NFL. I thought that was pretty interesting. Not to say that other programs don't have that, but this is a different deal here. There's no doubt.
They see how we practice, and they see we've been here long enough, and from Coach's tenure at Western, he had a lot of guys have success and are still in the NFL from his time there too, to where you know what you're getting. There's a brand. Much like you go to a store, if you're going to buy a Coke or Pepsi, you know what you're buying. So I think in terms of the NFL, they understand what the Minnesota brand is. They understand what Coach Fleck's brand is. If Coach Fleck, who I know from my time as being a scout, he spends more time with scouts than any coach when I was on the road. Now, there's a difference between when I was on the road, a coach would, come up to you at practice, say hi, they taking care of you and anything, and you'd be like, yeah, thanks, appreciate it, versus sitting down in his office for extended period of time to because he loves these kids like they're his own, and this class especially has helped kind of bring everything that we were talking about bringing here from our time at Western Michigan and building this to where to be as competitive as we are year in, year out now. And it's just exactly what you're getting and the type of kids. If they're a good player and they've been here that long, we don't worry about their personal character, their football character, their love of the game, their intelligence. They've shown that and they've earned that. So it's pretty easy. It makes my job a lot easier about these guys. So
how often is it? Almost every practice, somebody from an NFL team is with you throughout the season.
Yeah, every day I would say, and that is open during training camp, and then until we get to about November, scouts are starting to get smart. Once it comes in November time, they're like, I'm gonna try to not be on the road up here in November.
We're gonna go watch Georgia play or practice. Yeah,
we'll be in
somewhere south.
Yes, warmer than here. So,
and then how does that work with you? Are you the guy, like if I'm a scout for the Cleveland Browns, as you were at one time, do I just call you and say, hey, I'd like to come to practice Thursday and watch a certain guy, or does it vary?
Yeah, so generally the process goes, we're open, as open as any program in the country in terms of access and visits, and Coach Fleck does a great job with us allowing us to do that. So Tuesdays and Wednesdays are generally our padded practices, or our practices that we get our most work in terms of those are the best to watch if you're an evaluator as a scout coming in. So I attempt to steer them to those days, but knowing that their schedules are what they are. If they need to come to a Thursday or Friday practice, if it's a home game, or if they're coming on a game day, so we'll get them in. I'll spend time with them. Coach Nickel will spend time with them. Coach Fleck generally spends time with them before practice starts, and then they're going to ask their questions about, what are his parents like? How was he raised? What's his home life like? Does he have a girlfriend? Does he have a serious relationship? Who's in his life? Who's in his circle, essentially? And they want to get to know everything about this person, because at the end of the day, they're going to be investing hundreds of thousands or tens of millions of dollars into this individual, to where they want to kind of poke every hole in them as they can. And so they get as much background from us, and then they'll watch practice, they'll watch film, they'll end up talking to our position coaches and trainers and equipment staff, basically anybody that could potentially come across with them. The good ones are going to find a way to get their time and get their ear. So that's generally a day. With modern technology, they spend less time probably watching film and more time gathering background and talking to people, because that's the most important thing when you're on a visit anymore, is because of the technology. It's so much easier to get film. So.
Does it get more serious then as the player gets older? I would assume, like maybe if it's a freshman or sophomore, but hey, this guy's looking good in practice, but they maybe at that point aren't that worried yet about who mom and dad is, who girlfriend is, what grades are, whatever.
So generally, I'll give them kind of like, hey, here's the guys that are exhausting eligibility, or here's the guys that we're talking about from the immediacy of the next draft class. And that's generally their main focus, just because the NFL can't touch you until 3 years removed from high school. Now, COVID is kind of creates a little bit more of a limbo of who is and who is not draft eligible. So that's a little bit more a headache for pro liaisons around the country and area scouts about like who their list is. But for the most part, when they come in here, we had a Rising Senior Day this spring with about 15, 20 guys of ours that we put in front of young scouts, and they measured them, and they did some tests and background stuff that way. So they kind of generate the list. National Football Scouting, which also runs a combine, and Blesto are two organizations that represent about 29 of the 32 NFL teams. So that information gets distributed. And so they generally come with a list of who they think they need to ask about, and then I will supplement, or Coach Fleck will supplement with, hey, you should also look at this guy too.
Yeah, and I know I've been at practice at times where I'll see a young guy and I'll go even to you or to whoever on the sideline, hey, who's number 28 or whatever. I just threw that number out there. And for me, it's mostly just to have a one to sometimes just know who 28 is. But how often does that happen where a scout is there to talk about, as you mentioned, that next group of graduates, and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, who's number 45 out there? Who's number –
Every practice, every day, there's like, who's this guy? Am I supposed to be looking at this guy or not? And I'll say, he's just a freshman. Or I remember when Tea Time got here, I'm like, this kid's a 10 through 800 meter, so you can worry about him in 4 or 5 years. But just so you can, because I know
put him on your list. Yeah.
I was in that job before. I have a good relationship with a lot of the guys that come here, and I do my best to. Here's the guys you really need to focus on. Here's the guys that are going to be coming down the pipe, so you're going to be having to come back here next year with more bodies, more visits. So we definitely love the NFL guys coming through. It's good for our players to see them coming through, and then it helps us in recruiting. It helps us when these guys go on and be successful, and it also helps train them for at any given practice, any given moment, someone could be watching, and that's that play or that interaction that you had with your coach or your teammate is like, that's that moment where I knew this kid was right for us, Team X, because how he held himself accountable, how he held his teammates accountable, that like those intangible traits. If they just wanted the film, they'd just watch the film. They come to practice to see how these guys interact with one another, how people respond to them. Everyone's a leader, but being a leader is different than just having that, trait attributed to you. So I think some of the guys in this class, I think of the Tanners and the Moes and the John Michaels, just the leadership that they've had, Mariano especially, those guys were leaders. And I think when scouts came to practice this year to watch these guys, they saw it, they felt it, they heard it, and then it reinforces what our coaches tell them on the side and what I tell them on the side. So they know exactly what they're getting. Going back to the, when you PJ Fleck, coach, player at Minnesota, the type of kid, how they've been trained, and I think that's why they're valued highly by league circles these days.
We talked about this last year, but I think it's worth reiterating. Then we're going to get into the individual players to find out kind of what you're hearing about them. And that is when you're talking to NFL scouts, you want to certainly, for the good of the program and the good of the player who you've created a great relationship with, promote that guy and say, hey, you should draft him or he's great. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, how much – like if you do that for everybody and there's a couple strikeouts there, at some point your credibility becomes an issue too. So how is that balancing act to say, yeah, here's why this guy's great, but how much do they also want to know, well, Marcus, what do you think? I mean, where does he need work? And then how honest do you have to be on that as well, knowing that there's that, I suppose, a bit of a balancing act there?
Yeah, there's two sides of it. There's the character side, and then there's the eval side. The football eval side, generally if I feel that they're way off, I will try to say, like, I see him every day, so like I see the pros and cons. I think he's more this than this, but that's what they get paid to do. My biggest thing is make sure that they get seen, and then that making sure that the guys that have legitimate NFL aspirations and legitimate NFL shot, they get seen by every team. And then it's up to those teams to take them. And then, I've been known to push on guys, and then those guys come back again in the next fall, and I say, I told you about this guy, you went higher than you thought he would go. And so I think there's that give and take relationship-wise, and we use them a lot too, and to help, advise some of our guys about, should I stay, should I go? And there's a lot of relationships that I've built over the years, that coaches have built over the years, where we can pick up the phone and call, 10, 20, teams and just say, hey, where do you see this guy, and then give them that live information, that live feedback to help them make that decision.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to like the background side of it, like, thankfully I'm at a program that's run so well where it's hard for someone, if they don't do the right things all the time, to survive 4 or 5 years.
You're right.
And so the guys that get, go on to pursue the NFL that have finished it, they've had to, they've grown up. The maturity level is there. I don't feel bad about talking about them in terms of, who they are, because I don't have to sugarcoat stuff. And what I do tell all these guys in the process is that I'm never going to lie for you. I'm never going to tell anyone something that you're not about yourself, because to your point, if I say that every player is the hardest working, greatest kid I've ever been around, then I'm doing a disservice to the next man. So, so there's the young players on our team that do those things. To your point, you can't burn bridges that way. So.
Yeah, I think it's all a unique aspect for sure. Let me read a quick commercial, and we're going to talk about the guys that could be NFL players from this team. Affinity Plus, your local credit union, proudly serving Minnesota since 1930. We thank them for being a part of our Go Gopher podcast. If you're a current Gopher student or a proud Gopher alum, you're eligible to join a financial that wants to build a meaningful banking relationship and put you first. You can meet with a local employee at any of their branches. They're statewide, including right off campus here in Minneapolis. To learn more and find another way to connect, you can go to affinityplus.org/GoGophers, affinityplus.org/GoGophers. Affinity Plus, Federal Credit Union, federally insured by NCUA. Marcus Hendrickson, Director of Player Personnel, with us. We have a list of 10 guys from this Gopher team from this past season that have some NFL aspirations. Some of these guys will get drafted. Some of these guys will be street free agents at the end of the draft, and some may make rosters. Some are certainly going to give it a go. So let's run through this list. I know you're a busy man, so I appreciate the time. And we got to start, I think, with John Michael Schmitz. I think he's consensus the guy that's going to get his name called first in this draft, maybe even as soon as Thursday night in the first round. What are you hearing from him? I mean, we know what a great player he has been, what a great leader he has been. He's meant a lot to the program. Probably should have won, what was it, the Outland, I think, right? And
Remington?
Remington, sorry,
Yep.
the Remington. Yep. So what are you hearing on John Michael Schmitz?
Yeah, I think, every guy and every team, they're going to be a little bit tight to the vest these days about who they like and who they don't like. And I think he's done nothing but put himself in the best position possible through all. He went to the Senior Bowl. He did the Combine. He had a ton of meetings, private workouts, stuff like that. Since then, with a number of teams, I'm very confident. He won't last long in day two. I think there's an outside shot he can go in the first with the right team. I think a lot of it just depends on how the board goes. I think John's a victim of the position that he plays. If he was a tackle and not a center, I think he'd probably be he'd be a surefire, top 20 type guy. But that's just the nature of the business. So.
There's only 32 starting centers, right?
Yeah, and his being the best at something is great, and I think there's a lot of teams that have good centers out there already on NFL rosters. So, he's going to go to a position or to a place that I think is going to be really good for him, and he's going to get a chance to start right away and start his career the right way early. And he's got the mindset and to handle that, and whoever ends up getting him is going to get a very good player. We were down at the Senior Bowl, and Coach Callie's a Chicago guy, just like John Michael, and Coach Eberflus, who's the head coach of the Bears, he was a linebackers coach when I was in Cleveland. So I reintroduced myself to him, and I said, hey, if you need a guy to run your offensive line, I said, John Michael's the guy. So I know they're one of many teams that are, I think, highly interested in him, and I think have picks in that kind of 25 to 50 window that he'll probably end up going in.
He is a guy, assuming good health, let's just say if he's healthy, he can have a long NFL career, right? I mean, he just has been a productive player.
Yeah, he's, health is always the biggest thing. It's not for long league, as they call it. So, but if there's anybody that's going to play 8, 9, 10 years in the league of this list of guys, he'd be the one that I'd put it on. No disrespect to the other guys. I think all those guys would understand me saying that too. And he's just the grit, the toughness, just to do what it takes for that position and that, for an offensive lineman. Like he's wired the right way, and we're sad to see him go. He's hard one to replace in my current seat. So
he's very good for sure. And last one about him, I'm thinking in terms of the time you guys have been here, in terms of like if you're going to have a draft pick and you're going to put a cut up of highlights together, regardless of position, he might have the most impressive cut up of tapes with pancakes and blocking downfield and sprinting to open holes and calling line signals. I mean, certainly Bateman had some great catches and Tyler Johnson and others, but might he have the most impressive one?
Well, it depends on the audience, I would say.
Right.
You know,
right.
To a guy like me, meat and potatoes football type guy, like his every play, how hard he played, the urgency and violence that he played with, that's fun tape. And it's probably a very long tape because some of our receivers probably only had 6 or 7 targets a game. He had 60, 70 snaps a game where he was putting his body and moving men against their will. So
yeah. Pretty impressive. All right, let's run through some of these others. Mohamed Ibrahim, obviously all-time leading rusher in school history, and I've seen so many varying, mocks or he's a free agent. Oh, he'll go, whatever, third round, so it's hard to know, right?
Yeah, it's a hard one for me to pin down too. Kind of similarly to John Michael with center, like running back is a position that has been devalued in the NFL of late, and so. Every year, that position, where does the first one go? Where's the run on running backs? Is it early? Is it middle? Is it late? I think for him, I feel confident that there's a team out there that wants him, that wants his temperament and his style of play that really fits what they want to do. If he ended up back close to home, I think he'd be really excited about that. And that team likes to run the ball. But we'll have to wait and see. I think he's another guy that has done everything that has been asked of him, and I'm excited to see where he ends up because he's a guy that when he was coming out of high school, we got here, he was an uncommitted guy, smaller guy, can he handle playing in the Big Ten,
Yeah.
And he's done everything in his tenure here to break all those questions and stereotypes, being like, no, this guy is legit. And I think he's going through that same recruiting process, is he big enough? Is he fast enough? Watch him with the ball in his hands over as many times as I've seen it, and there's not a better one. So I think there's teams out there that are smart enough to not let, go against the grain a little bit when it comes to the running back position, and they're going to get a really good one.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the production's there. He's the number one rusher in the history of the program. Tea time, Terrell Smith, and what a career, what an arc he had. Came in as a freshman starter, and then you mentioned Benjamin St. Juste came in, and that nullified some of his playing time, and then some nagging injuries and inconsistencies, and then what a great senior year he had.
Yeah, and Tea time started that last offseason. It's never been the physical with him. It's always been just the confidence, and he really spent this offseason, last offseason, focusing on the little things and getting better. And he showed up this year every game, and he's a guy that he's a type of player that a lot of teams value, that length, that speed. And then he really backs it up this year with his play in terms of physicality on the perimeter in the run game, in terms of making plays in the ball. So I can see him, sky's the limit with him. He could go as high as what Ben did back in 2020 or 2021 draft. But it's also a scenario that, how many corners are out there? How does the teams that value that type of player, did they already have someone? Did they take someone? So he's kind of anywhere, I think, from that late day 2 to to midday 3 is kind of the window that I would see him in, just because of that size and that speed. That's what they want. It's kind of the inverse of Mo. Like Mo's like this super productive, has done it all type player, but maybe he doesn't have the size, speed that plays at that. Whereas Tea Time's he's starting to show that production, but he's more of what plays at that level.
He looks like the guy.
It's a different kind of equation with those two. So. So I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth. I think this guy's he's the better football player. This guy's the better plays at that level. So it's always everyone's a little bit different. And all 32 teams look at things differently. And some teams value body type more than other teams. Some teams value production more than other teams. So it depends on who's the decision makers on any given day. But both those both those guys are going to have success wherever they end up.
I know at Pro Day we chatted with him a little bit, and he talked about in the off season he started to work with the training staff for flexibility, and every day put in extra time with I don't know whatever stretches and exercises it is, and that has helped his play, and I suppose how NFL teams look at him with his flexibility and swivel.
Coach Fleck would call it buttery hips, but he spent a lot of time the last 3 years even working with Dan Nickel on his hip flexibility. He's always been a very linear, fast athlete, but it's been some of the lateral stuff that he needed to be an elite athlete at the level that he's going to compete at. You need to be better at it, and that discipline was easier for me to talk to him about scouts, just saying that he does this every day. He's in there every day at the same time, doing this with Coach Nickel. This isn't required by our staff. This is something that he's doing on his own. So that initiative and consistency was another reason why I think he's going to get a really good opportunity.
Well, and they always like fast guys, right? At
yes,
the end of the day,
yes.
They always like fast guys, and he can run for sure. Jordan Howden, what a story too. Safety, 4-year starter, started as a preferred walk-on, and took some lumps. I remember that day down at Maryland. There were some lumps to be taken. His first real throwing into the fire, and by the end, that was a guy you wanted to go to battle with, right?
Yeah, 2018 Maryland. Yeah, that was a rough day for a lot of us. But he's a fun young man, and he's a guy that I don't know if anyone's played more defensive snaps since we've been here than Jordan Howden, and to do it at the level he has, and the athleticism that he has, the speed that he has, I think you don't always notice it because of the nature of the position. He's the safety, he's the last man back there. He's not, but he's always the guy that we felt if push came to shove, we got thin at corner, we got thin at nickel, he could go down and play those positions because of his length and athleticism. And he had a really good pro day. He's another guy that was at the combine. I expect him to be a draft pick. He's done everything he should and can do here at the University of Minnesota to help himself with that. So he's a guy that I when I talk with scouts about him, he's kind of that Swiss Army knife, jack of all, master of none. He can be a depth guy at free, at strong, at nickel, emergency corner, can play on teams. So people forget, we have 85 scholarships, and we can travel 73 on game days in the Big Ten. But in the NFL, you've got 47 guys.
Yeah.
So it's hard for our coaches to figure out our travel roster sometime. We'll have that, So guys that can do multiple things, that versatility is key, and I think that's part of the reason why Jordan's going to get drafted and Jordan's going to end up having a good career.
Yeah, and he was a great special teams player here as well. All right, so Tanner Morgan, we talk about production, we talk about what does he have on tape. I know he was at a couple of All-Star games. What can you tell us about Tanner Morgan?
He's the best. I love this kid. We share the same birthday, but. He's exactly what I think certain teams are looking for from a standpoint of he's a very mature kid. He's always been a very mature kid. He's always been productive everywhere he's been. And I think he's that I don't envision Tanner ever starting multiple seasons for a team in the NFL, but I can see, the guy that is that second, third quarterback that knows the offense on limited reps to get you out of a situation, get you through a short patch where your starter's hurt, but also be that extra coach, that peer mentor, that guy that can help, for a young, talented quarterback that maybe hasn't had the accrued seasons, the accrued snaps, doesn't see it as well. That type of guy that can really be of value. And I think he's got enough, and I think he showed at his pro day the ability to physically be good enough, but his intangible traits are what's really sells him amongst a lot of other guys. And I think, I think what Brock Purdy did this year for San Francisco, he was Mr. Irrelevant,
last pick of the draft. And he went there, and I think their careers and their skill sets are very different. They're both 6'1" type quarterbacks. Kind of helped build a program, played a lot of snaps, but never was kind of like a big time accolade guy. And he went out there and had success, and so I think that for the Midwest scouts that I talked to, there's an easy correlation that way. So I can see Tanner
definitely landing with the team and then, making the most of whatever opportunity he gets.
Yeah, because in one way, in the draft, it's weird because teams want to draft young players. 21-year-olds or 22-year-olds are better than 25-year-olds. Tanner's old. But the role you described, you want an old guy.
Yeah.
And so he's beyond his years a little bit as a rookie. You're going to pay a guy rookie money to, as you say, be, one, an emergency guy like Purdy was. And who knows where Purdy will end up. Will he be the starter? Who knows? But two, we've heard Kirk Cousins talk about how important the backup quarterback spot is to help him with a game plan during the week. And Tanner can certainly do that wherever he goes.
Yeah, and he's such a mature young man, and understands it. He gets it. Like he's self-aware, and like going down the stretch this season, like he wasn't able to play because of his injuries, but he was helping the team the best he could, getting Ethan ready, and so He knew that like that's the best way that he can help the team, and he's gonna if that's his role at the NFL level, he's gonna do it. I've had nothing but great things to say about him to all the NFL teams that come through, and I think he understands that if that's his vein, to keep playing football, like that drive, that love of the game is what separates him from a lot of guys that. He'll be successful no matter what.
Yeah,
so.
he's just a great dude. I mean, he's been one of the more fun guys to cover for me too over the years here at Minnesota. So wish him the best. Another one of those guys I'd put in that category as one of my favorites is Mariano Sori-Marin, another Chicago kid, and he's been on this podcast a few times over the years, and we've done food breakdowns and we've done real football breakdowns, and he has just a smart guy, great family. Incredible story with which we've talked about. In fact, I think it he nobody knew about that story in a mass media type thing until he mentioned it on this podcast about his great uncle and his grandfather coming from Cuba. We don't have to go into all that. Go back and listen to the past podcast. But what a story he is, and he's got a shot here.
Yeah, I mean he's one of those guys that you don't realize NFL teams are looking at these athletes. They're looking for size. They're looking for speed. They're looking for elite athletes. And Mariano doesn't always scream like the best athlete on the field. But we had him at camp when he was coming out. It was in summer of 2017, and he tested really well. So I knew he was going to test well at his pro day, and he did test very well. He ran in the 4.6s. And then you put that in with how mentally sharp he is and how physically tough and how much he loves football. Like he's a guy very similar to Jack Gibbons the year prior that like you're going to nitpick him a little bit here or there, but then when you actually watch the film, like how physical he is, how tough he is, and then you get him in the room, and that's where these guys separate themselves is, they get the opportunity to go to an NFL team, and then there's linebackers coaches or special teams coaches. They're playing chess, and you're a chess piece. And the better that you're able to execute what they ask you to do with consistency and precision, like those guys get valued. So maybe there's a guy that's a little bit more athletic than you, a little bit faster than you, but can you think faster than them? Can you react faster than them? Can you be more consistent than them? And so that, that's when guys earn jobs, make rosters, is in those moments. And then I think of guys like Mariano, I think of Thomas Rush. Like both those guys are guys that are going to be able to go in there, be a sponge, absorb everything that they're giving them, and then spit it out in a short amount of time and really execute the details that are required of them that make them invaluable. And so you'd be like, holy cow, how did this guy make this roster? Yeah. It's like, how does this guy, Jack Gibbons starting games at the end of the season as an undrafted guy? It's because it's between the years, So they to play in the NFL, you have to have basic, metrics of size and speed and strength, just to survive the game. But it's what's between the years really kind of deviates and delineates the guys that are average to really good. So.
Yeah, and Mariano, I think, has kind of gotten into this this legendary reputation of film study, and you hear the young guys, and they all, on the defense especially, say, yeah, I learned how to study film from Mariano, and I think he says he learned how to study film from Thomas Barber, who's now, of course, on your staff and all those things, so it's kind of fun. I think about Morgan, who we just talked about, and Mariano, who we're talking about now. it wouldn't stun me if they're like next in line. Maybe, hopefully, they have long NFL careers, but whenever it happens, that they would be next in line to get added to a coaching staff like Winston was done here with the Gophers, because he's had a early impression. But both those guys strike me as guys who could coach the game.
Yeah, and I may be asking one of those guys for a job, and at some point down the road too. They're both, their makeup and their intelligence and their love of the game. Like I would have them on any staff that I work on.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Well, you mentioned Thomas Rush. Let's move to him next. Rush came in, I think, as a linebacker, right? And then you guys kind of look what you did with Carter, moved him outside, and he had a productive career as well, and he's got a shot. Yeah,
he was a high school running back that came in. We recruited as a linebacker, was on linebacker until, I believe, the COVID year, and then we moved him to the rush position. But that versatility, that athleticism, another guy that tested extremely well, another guy that we knew was going to test extremely well. I had some teams reaching out about, can he play fullback? Would he be willing to play fullback? And I think, his path to roster, his path to playing in the NFL is going to be that. There again, Swiss Army knife. He's going to be a backup, edge guy, backup inside guy, playing all four phases teams. He was a very good special teams player here for us too. And so there may be a better linebacker than Thomas in this draft, but is there a better guy that can play this, and this? And going back to how do you make a roster in the NFL, it's that versatility, that intelligence, that ability to play multiple spots in a short pinch. I think Thomas has that kind of Swiss Army knife aspect to him that will allow him to make a team this year.
Let's talk about two of the stronger guys on last year's team, Axel Rushmeyer and Chuck Filianga, both offensive linemen, both guards. They kind of bookended, or I guess, flanked the All-America center, John Michael Schmitz, one on the right, one on the left. Tell us about those two guys.
Yeah, both those guys, they both did a really good job at Pro Day. That's always a benefit when, you've got a blue chip player like John Michael, then the more eyeballs are there watching you. And so they both did a really good job with their opportunity. They both done a really good job, throughout the season, being consistent, playing tough, playing banged up. Axel, I always think about just, he was a walk-on when we first got here who had was coming off an injury. And then to say that he's not only started, but was a multiple-year starter for us. And he's another guy that was at the spring game this past week, and his toughness and intelligence, and I think he's going to get an opportunity. Someone will give him an opportunity after the draft to come in, and just because there's not a lot of big guys out there, and the number of guys in the NFL, that's probably I would say the weakest position depth-wise, just because there's you need a lot of them, and there's not a ton of them are being produced year in, year out. You're seeing a little bit more now on the high school side too. It's a lot cooler to play quarterback or be the receiver. Like a lot of NFL cornerbacks probably were recruited in college as receivers, so like guys want the ball. So I think when I think about Axel, I think about Chuck, these kind of meat and potatoes, offensive linemen, tough guys that, work really hard or smart. They do everything they're asked. I think, both are going to have a good opportunity wherever it ends up to fight for a practice squad spot. So
our last guy amongst the group of 10 that we're talking about here on the Go Gopher podcast, special teamer Matthew Trickett, who had a good 2-year stretch here with the Gophers, and as a place kicker, that's always a premium spot in the NFL. Every game comes down to a field goal, so you need a guy that can make a clutch field goal. So what's your scouting report on him, and what do you hear about him?
His consistency every year he was here was awesome, and that was something coming out of Kent State where he was All-MAC Special Teams Player of the Year there in that conference, and he lived up to that billing here for us. Just the consistency of his stroke as a kicker, great kid, and I think his pro day really surprised a lot of people just because we didn't give him a lot of opportunities. We weren't in a lot of positions to kick long field goals. Right. And because we have Dragon, who's got such a great kickoff leg, like he didn't get to showcase maybe how strong his leg was all the time. But the way he kicked at Pro Day, I think, opened a lot more eyes about this kid's not only a consistent, accurate field goal kicker, but he also can have that leg strength to kick some of those longer kicks and then also do the kickoff stuff, which is not to broken record, but if you're going to be a specialist in the NFL, there's only going to be one of you on the roster, so you've got to be able to do kind of everything. So I think he really put himself in a really good position, and at a position that's probably one of the hardest to crack, because if you're a good kicker, you can kick for 20 years.
Yes.
So and so there's not always there's a couple openings every year, and so to be the best offensive lineman in the NFL draft, like there's a lot more openings, a lot more vacancies. It's easier to kind of crack that nut, whereas kickers, punters, long snappers, that's always a little bit harder. But I think he put himself in a position based off of his career, his body of work, but also how he performed on pro day.
And kickers, too, it's one of those deals where they just recycle guys, right? So even if you got cut by a team, if you have 6 or 7 years in the league, some other team that needs a kicker is going to go with that guy usually instead of some young guy. So it's hard to prove yourself, too, right? There's just so few chances.
I think when I was in Cleveland, we had our kicker and punter go down at different times, and we had back-to-back days of 7 or 8 kickers workouts at the same bring in a crew, work them out, bring another crew and work them out. And so it's it's how you kick on that specific day, but it's also your body of work and your history and your pedigree that kind of help dictate whether you get an opportunity or not. So.
Well, hopefully they put in the tape in Lincoln, Nebraska when he kicked those 2 kicks down there this past season. That was the key to the, they went. You don't win the game without those kicks, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. He's shown to be clutch when we really needed him to. So.
All right. Well, hey, man, I kept you almost double what I told you. I appreciate it. I hope you didn't have some meeting that you're missing out on here. But so much good info. We had to get the Luther College plug-in to start, of course, and then fun to hear about these 10 guys. An exciting week for you, I know, and the football part of it never ends for you.
Yeah, I'll never forget last year. We were kind of leaving the office in day 3 and didn't know if Coe was going to get drafted or not, but he got drafted. That was exciting.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Well, I remember, I think on the podcast you even said, because not a lot of people were putting him in any mock drafts, you said, hey, I think there's a chance because people want that mauling tight end that can block. And actually, he ended up catching some passes too. But I think you were the first guy to kind of put me onto the fact that Coe might get drafted because nobody had him as a guy that was going to get drafted.
Well, I think that's the same way with Mo. It's like Coe was the best blocking tight end in college football last year, and 2 years ago now, excuse me. And so if you have the market cornered, you have a premium on this skill, this specific trait. Plus, he was a good special teams player, which he continued to do down in Tampa this year. Like, someone's going to find value where other people don't see value. And so because there's 32 teams, there is going to be someone is going to fall in love with Muhammad Ibrahim. Someone's going to fall in love with a Coe Keeft. And then when you put it into the program and the culture that we have here at Minnesota, where these guys that thrive aren't just guys that are just long, beautiful athletes that are just naturally gifted and fast. It's guys that have had to fight and claw and do it the right way for a long time to where you know what exactly you're getting. And Coe is a perfect example of that last year. And I think Mo, Mariano, these guys that maybe not every team's going to love, but the team that fits them is going to love them, and they're going to do a really good job for them.
And they'll fit in, no doubt. Well, hey, we'll let you get back to it. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Marcus Hendrickson, Director of Player Personnel, University of Minnesota Golden Gopher Football. It's episode 67 of the Go Gopher podcast.
I hope you enjoyed hearing from Gopher Director of Player Personnel Marcus Hendrickson and all the insight about the Gopher football players prepping for this week's NFL Draft. The Go Gopher podcast episode 67 is presented by Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. If you're buying or selling a business, visit sunbeltminnesota.com or tnma.com today. We're also partnered with Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union, a locally member-owned full-service financial invested in you. You can learn more at affinityplus.org/Go Gophers. They have a top-ranked mobile app as well. We're also sponsored by State Farm agent Tony Hoagland. Again, I'd invite you to listen to past podcasts, and right now be sure to click the subscribe button to the Go Gopher podcast. It's free to subscribe and free to listen. And please share the link to the podcast with others so they can listen as well. We'll talk again next week.